You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC Vegas 93, Perez versus Taira preview, predictions, and analysis. UFC Vegas 93 takes place this upcoming Saturday, June 15th, from the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada, between the former flyweight title challenger and Alex Perez taking on the up-and-coming undefeated prospect and one of the hottest prospects in the UFC in Tatsuro Taira in the flyweight division, trying to determine the next challenger or potentially contender at 125 pounds to take on the champion in Alexandre Pantoja. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. Alright, I am not going to go into a whole breakdown of last night's card. I just don't have time, so I'm going to break down this next week's card, but I'll give you a brief synopsis. I ended up picking Miguel Baeza on my predictions for my podcast, but the night of the fights, or the day of, I ended up changing my pick to Punahele Soriano. We had Dominic Reyes as the underdog. You do not have to believe me. Obviously, the video says what it says, but I ended up betting on Punahele. I had Punahele by TKO in the first two rounds, and honestly, we should have got it. I mean, that should have been an easy cash at over plus 400. Obviously, it didn't go our way. Well, it didn't go that way in terms of, exact methods and round combos. But, overall, on the card, I ended up going 10 out of 14. I changed my pick as well from Rayan Dos Santos to Puja Tomar. I did not predict that fight on the podcast, though, so, that wasn't an official prediction. But you don't have to believe me. Obviously, it is what it is. But we had a decent week. We profited in terms of the betting, and we're looking to do the same thing for UFC Vegas 93. We're going to kick it off with the first fight in the featherweight division between Melquizael Costa taking on Shailon Nerdum-Bike. This fight is basically the battle of the Mean Machine Steve Garcia's sons. Both of these men have been finished violently by TKO by Steve, the Mean Machine Garcia. Both these men came into those fights as pretty heavy favorites as well. When I look at this fight, like I said, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time breaking this one down. But I think the better striker overall is Nerdum-Bike. I think he has better explosiveness. I think he lands with the more technical shots. I think the better kicker is probably going to be Costa. We saw in the fight against, I cannot think of the guy's name now, Austin Lingo. He was constantly throwing kicks to the body, switch kicks to the body, and that front snap kick or stabbing teep kick right to the breadbasket. And it was working a lot. He should have got a finish in that fight. He didn't do it. But both of these guys are very good at being the hammer and not good at being the nail. I would say that Costa probably can last a little bit longer being the nail because he has the higher level grappling, higher level ability to take the back, higher level ability to get submissions, and I think he might be able to push the pace a little bit longer than Nerdum-Bike, but both of these guys got cracked with big shots by Garcia. So I think that big shot from Garcia with the boxing he employs, he could hurt anybody with those shots. So I don't take that away from either guy. The UFC or MMA level experience would obviously go to Nerdum-Bike, who has over 50 fights, or a little bit close to 50 fights. I think this is his 50th fight, or this might be his 51st. And when I look at this fight, I really think it's a coin flip. I think this should be pick'em odds. I think this fight can go either way. I do like the game of Nerdum-Bike a little bit more, though. I feel like he has more power on the feet. I feel like he can hang on the ground and probably has the better wrestling, where I think Melquizael Costa has the better jiu-jitsu. But I think the wrestling can control the positions of Melquizael. I think the better cardio probably goes to Costa because I feel like I've seen him be able to push a little bit higher of a pace. But if he's able to get the takedowns easily because Costa wants to, concede position and go for submissions or look to sweep, then I think he can have the cardio to go 15 minutes. I think this fight probably goes late. I don't see an early finish, but I am going to side with Nerdum-Bike. I'm going to go with Shailon Nerdum-Bike. I just like his game a little bit more. I think he's a little bit sharper, and I think his wrestling is going to outweigh the success of the jiu-jitsu from Melquizael Costa. If Costa wins, is probably a late second round, early third round submission. But I think Nurmagomedov's wrestling, grappling, top control, and ground and pound is going to be able to win him rounds in this fight. And I think he gets the job done via decision. I'm going to go with Shailon Nurmagomedov to win this fight, 29-28, unanimous decision. Not a fight I would bet on. I think these guys are both kind of glass cannons. I just have a little bit more faith in Shailon at this point. Up next is actually one of my favorite fights on the entire card in the strawweight division between two Contender Series alums and Josephine Knudsen taking on Julia Polastri. I really like this fight. These are two very high-level women. Two very high-level women that we haven't really seen compete in the UFC yet. We saw Josephine Knudsen fight Marnik Mann, and she pushed the pace, but she wasn't able to get the finish. On the Contender Series, she was kind of dominating the fight for the entire time and didn't push for a finish, and that was something that Dana White didn't really love. She tried to get a finish in her last fight as well, but I feel like she could have pushed a little bit harder in order to get that finish. I think Marnik Mann was kind of out of it after the first round, and I think if Knudsen really put the foot on the gas pedal, she could have got her out of there, but she didn't, and she ended up winning via decision. Julia Polastri on the Contender Series, she's actually been on the Contender Series multiple times. The first time she went on the Contender Series, she took on Jasmine Jasudavicius, who is actually somebody that we really like on this podcast, somebody that I really like, somebody that I backed in her last fight to win via submission against Priscilla Cachoeira. And Polastri, just continued to get taken down over and over and over again. She does have submissions off of her back. I would say that Knudsen is better everywhere, but Polastri is not a fighter who's going to quit on herself. And I think the pace that Polastri pushes, the volume that she can output on the feet, the ability to look for submissions, the ability to use her own wrestling, I think the fight is close. I just feel like Knudsen is a little bit sharper in every aspect of the game. But I do think that Polastri probably has the better cardio the later that the fight goes. I feel like Knudsen's going to be really solid for the first round and a half, 2 rounds, but I think the third round, if Polastri can get in the face and not allow for Knudsen to control, the distance, control the output, that's where Polastri can take over. I know that Knudsen is a big favorite, but I would not be so surprised if she ended up losing this fight late because she got tired and Polastri just pushed a pace that Knudsen really couldn't keep up with all the way. 10-0 for Knudsen. I believe it's 7-1 for Julia Polastri, but Polastri has really solid boxing. She punctuates her combinations with kicks, good 1-2s down the middle, throws uppercuts, throws hooks, multi-shot combinations, and really looks to put it on the opponent. She's not afraid to get hit, but she does get hit, and I think that Knudsen, like I said, is probably the sharper fighter, the better technician. I think she has better wrestling. I think she'll be able to get the fight to the ground. I think that she has the wrestling to be able to stifle the jiu-jitsu and submission attempts of Polastri, kind of like the last fight we just talked about with Costa and Nurmagomedov. I think that Knudsen can go to her wrestling. I think it would be smart for her to go to the wrestling and use the wrestling to kind of offset the rhythm and the forward pressure of Polastri. But Polastri also has subs that she can go to. I mean, she got a submission finish on her second bout on the Contender Series. And I really like this fight. I like this fight a lot. I think this fight is going to be a banger. And it could go either way. I'm surprised that Knudsen is almost a 3-1 favorite. I think it's minus 275, minus 280, somewhere around there. I do think she's the better fighter. I do think that she has the better wrestling and probably will use the takedowns to offset the forward pressure like we talked about. But I wouldn't be surprised if she started slowing down and Polastri had a really solid third round and either broke her and finished her down the stretch, or was able to make the judging very wishy-washy, and maybe based on the lack of output from Knudsen in the first couple rounds, maybe she can squeak by with one of those, but then have a big third round, which causes her to either get the finish or win by decision. I'm going to go with Josephine Knudsen. I do like her. I like her technique on the feet. She is a training partner, or not a training partner, but she trains with Hamzat Chimaev out at All Stars in Sweden. She has very good 1-2s, very good uppercuts, hooks, low kicks, head kicks, front kicks to the body. All of her striking technique is crisp and clean. She is a very clean technician when it comes to the striking. She's very good at passing on the ground. She's very good at leg lacing when she has the opponent on their back, and she gets to the full mount, creeps her legs up to get the knees into the armpits, looks for ground and pound. She can flow from position to position on the mat. She's a very well-rounded fighter. I would venture to say that Knudsen is probably one of the most well-rounded fighters in the UFC in terms of the women's divisions. I really think that she has a very, very solid skill set. We just haven't really seen it put to the test yet against UFC level competition. I think Polastri is UFC level. I think she has very high output. She has higher output than Knudsen. She has more power than Knudsen. It's just, can she win the first 2 rounds? I'm sorry, does Knudsen win the first 2 rounds and Polastri has a big third? I think midpoint of the second into the third round is where Polastri's forward pressure, boxing output, combinations, and ability to wrestle will take over, or could take over, and make this fight very close. But I'm going to take Josephine Knudsen to win this fight 29-28, unanimous decision. But I would not be surprised if Polastri upset the big favorite here. She's very good, and she's a dog. She puts everything on the line when she steps into the cage, and I would not be surprised if she was able to kind of break Knudsen down the stretch. But the pick is Josephine Knudsen to win via 29-28 unanimous decision. Next fight up is in the featherweight division between Jekka Saragi taking on Weston Wilson. We saw Jekka Saragi put out Lucas Alexander in the first round after he swept him off a kick catch, I think it was. Yeah, he caught his kick, swept him, and then as Alexander got up, he bum rushed him and landed a big right hand or a big left hook. It was either an overhand or a hook, and caught Lucas Alexander on the chin as he was standing up and knocked him out. Jekka Saragi got finished on the Contender Series, on the road to UFC by Anshul Jubli, and got taken down over and over, rinse and repeat, controlled from the top position, got grounded and pounded, and just got finished. He got broken. And we saw that Anshul Jubli was kind of a fraud, at least when it comes to UFC level competition. When we look at Weston Wilson, this guy has kind of just been a lamb led to the slaughter for the UFC. He's used to really build up the next up-and-comers in the UFC in the featherweight division, and I think this is what we have here with Saragi and Weston Wilson. Weston Wilson, as the side stance, he comes out of Team Pitch Black with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and has that side stance, can throw head kicks, can throw side kicks, but he does have good jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and we have seen holes in Jekka Saragi's game where he can get taken down, he can get controlled, he can give up positions, and he could get put into bad positions against a grappler the level of Weston Wilson. Maybe if you want to take a stab at it, you would play Weston Wilson by submission, because I do think that we've seen holes in Saragi's game in that realm of mixed martial arts, and I wouldn't be surprised if Wilson takes control of it. However, I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to get to that part of his game. If he's smart, Wilson would throw a couple jabs, maybe a side kick, and then just immediately go to the wrestling. He tries to stand for too long, he tries to put combinations together against these guys, and he just doesn't have the durability to be able to withstand the power, and I don't think he has the durability to withstand the power of a puncher like Jekka Saragi. I think Saragi clips him and knocks him out, maybe second round, but I'll go first round. I think he does clip and knock out Weston Wilson. I think that win over Lucas Alexander is actually a very good win. I'm pretty high on Alexander's overall skill set. I know he got submitted by Joe Anderson Brito early in that fight, but look at how good Brito's looked in his UFC career. He was supposed to be taking on Dan Ige, but he fell out of that fight due to an injury and absolutely beat the living shit out of his last opponent. So looking at this fight, I think it's going to be another Weston Wilson style UFC performance where he moves on the outside, doesn't go to the wrestling as early as he should, and gets clipped with a big shot by Jekka Saragi and gets finished in the first round. I'm going to go Jekka Saragi via first round knockout over Weston Wilson. Would not be surprised. Well, I would be surprised, but don't be surprised if Wilson, does get Saragi to the ground and Saragi has some trouble. But I think the power, not even the technique, just the power and explosiveness of Saragi on the feet is going to clip Weston Wilson and put him down in round one. So Jekka Saragi via first round knockout over Weston Wilson. Don't overthink this one. The answer is right there in front of you. All right, next up is a battle in the welterweight division between Josh Quinlan and Adam Fugit, or how I like to say, Adam Fuggit. And he kind of has a fuck it attitude in the octagon. This guy was able to ground and pound, what's the guy's name? Kinoshita. I can't think of his first name, but he ground and pound TKO'd Kinoshita, who was a big prospect that the UFC was looking to build up. And then, obviously, Billy Goff clipped him with a shot to the liver and put him down. Billy Goff had a crazy fight with Trey Waters, but ended up losing that fight via decision. I thought maybe he did enough to get the job done there, but that's just my opinion. Joshua Quinlan is a guy who knocked out Jason Witt, and everybody lost their minds and thought that this guy was the Francis Ngannou of the welterweight division. Newsflash, he's not. Do I think that Adam Fugit is a fighter where he could clip him and hurt him? Yes, because we've seen Adam Fugit get clipped, we've seen him get hurt, but we've also seen him lose to high-level competition, very solid fighters. Mike Malott, Michael Morales. Has a problem with guys named Mike, I guess. But looking at this fight, Quinlan has big power in the left hook, big power in the right hand, but he just wings his shots. He doesn't have enough volume. He has wrestling, but he doesn't go to it enough in his career inside the UFC, and he's just a power puncher. I mean, you know, Josh Quinlan is kind of a fraud. I don't like to use that term very often, but I think that this is a fight that Adam Fugit can win. I think this is a fight where everybody's expecting Quinlan to come in, clip Adam Fugit on the chin, and knock him out. Could it happen? 100%. But I think Adam Fugit, this fight is a pick'em, and I'm actually kind of upset because I was hoping that Fugit was going to be a pretty sizable underdog because of the power of Quinlan. But Quinlan did get TKO'd by Danny Barlow. That's exactly what we thought was going to happen. And then he lost that fight to Trey Waters, just getting outclassed, outpointed, and control that range. Adam Fugit is another long, rangy, tall fighter, and yes, he does have durability issues. If Quinlan runs in, lands a big hook, lands a big uppercut, lands a big overhand, he can knock out Adam Fugit. But the more well-rounded fighter is Adam Fugit, the better fighter technically when it comes to the boxing, the kickboxing, the grappling, and his overall mixed martial arts game is Adam Fugit. Adam Fugit is the much more well-rounded mixed martial artist, and he has much more tools in his basket in terms of when he steps into that octagon. And I'm going to go with the fighter who I believe has more tools. Is it a risky pick? Yes, because of the durability issues, but he's a better fighter than Josh Quinlan. Quinlan can wrestle. I don't think he's going to use it, and I think even if he uses wrestling against Fugit, Fugit can sweep, Fugit can stuff and take his back. Fugit's the better jiu-jitsu artist. I think he's the better grappler. He can flow between positions better when the fight does hit the mat. He just has to worry about the big bombs of Quinlan. But that's really all that Josh Quinlan has, are those big bombs. And like I said, he could knock out Fugit, but I just don't think so. I think Fugit is better at range. He uses more weapons. He uses more kicks. Quinlan kind of relies heavily on boxing, but he doesn't put combinations together. It's one or two shots, and it doesn't go higher than that. Fugit puts combinations together, moves well, can use the wrestling, can use the grappling, and I think this is just... You know, it's not an easy pick because of the power. Power is the great equalizer. But I think Adam Fugit breaks Josh Quinlan down the stretch and finds a submission. I'm going to go with Adam Fugit to win this fight via late second round rear naked choke. Could even be ground and pound. I mean, Quinlan got destroyed by Danny Barlow. Destroyed. And Barlow by KO was like plus 150 or something like that. It wasn't even crazy odds, but I think a lot of people thought Quinlan was going to win that one. No, that he was outmatched. I don't think he's outmatched here, but I think he's outgunned in terms of his overall game, and I think Fugit's going to survive the early storm, start to put his combos together, get some takedowns, slow down Quinlan, and get him out of there. I'm going to go Adam Fugit, late second round rear naked choke submission in this fight. I like Fugit a lot here. I mean, I don't love him, but I think he's the better fighter. Up next, you got a battle in the flyweight division between Jimmy the Brick Flick taking on Nate Maness. I'm going to be, again, pretty honest here. I think Nate Maness is going to body Jimmy Flick. Now, the last time Jimmy Flick fought, he took on Malcolm Gordon. I predicted Malcolm Gordon to win on the podcast, but I ended up betting Jimmy Flick by submission in round 1 or round 2. He ended up getting the sub close to the end of the second round, but he was getting pieced up on the feet. He was getting picked apart. But Malcolm Gordon just overextended, allowed for Jimmy Flick to take him down, and then eventually get the, I believe it was an arm triangle submission, and then that was it. He played into the game for too long, overextended it, and allowed the better grappler to get the fight to where he wanted to go. I do think Nate Maness is not going to be at the same level of grappling and jiu-jitsu as Jimmy Flick, but on the feet, I mean, it's night and day. Nate Maness will beat the living shit out of Jimmy Flick on the feet. His 1-2, his uppercuts, his front kick to the body. And the thing is like, even if Flick gets takedowns, if it's in a position where Maness can find power, he can knock him out off of his back. He can throw big, heavy shots. I mean, you saw in the fight with Mateus Mendonça and Nate Maness, that was a fight where I was pretty heavy on Mendonça, and then he just continued to go for a heel hook when he was getting punched in the face like 50 times. I don't know where the fight IQ was in terms of that game, because I do think Mendonça is a better fighter than Maness, but he just played dumb. He literally had the worst game plan, and like Daniel Cormier said, he allowed himself to lose that fight. He allowed himself to get knocked out. He got hit in the face like 2 or 3 times hard and continued to fight for a heel hook and leave his face unprotected. That's the problem with going for leg locks, is you have to use both hands to really control the limb, and you leave your chin there to get hit with big bombs if the fighter is a power puncher. I mean, think of in a different position, jiu-jitsu related, would be Kevin Holland on the bottom with Jacare Souza in his guard, and he kicks off of his hip, hits him with a hook, and then jumps on him and knocks him out because he was able to get enough torque and power into his shots. I think that this is a fight where, yes, Flick is always live to work his way to your back, find a submission, maybe jump for a flying armbar, a flying triangle, and an early submission could plague Maness. We've seen Maness get submitted early by another guy we're going to talk about later on the card in Tagir Ulanbekov. So he can get submitted. We have seen holes in his game in relation to the jiu-jitsu, but I think the power, the size, the aggressiveness, the overall technique on the feet, the ability to land ground and pound from awkward positions. I think Nate Maness is going to TKO Jimmy Flick here. I think he hurts him multiple times and then drops him, lets him back up, hurts him again, and eventually just gets the ref to jump in. I'm going to go Nate Maness via a first-round TKO against Jimmy Flick. I don't ever love picking first-round finishes, but I think in this fight, along with the Jekka Sargi and Weston Wilson fight, a first-round finish is applicable. So I think Maness is just going to be too aggressive, too powerful, and just too much in it as an overall MMA fighter for Jimmy Flick, who still can't really take a punch. I mean, you saw that in the Malcolm Gordon fight. So give me Nate Maness, first-round TKO. If he got caught in a submission, it wouldn't surprise me, because we know how good Flick's jiu-jitsu is, but I think the brick is going to get smashed, and Maness is going to put him away. So Nate Maness, first-round TKO over Jimmy Flick. All right, and the final fight up on the prelims is again in the 125-pound flyweight division. You have a battle between Tagir Ulanbekov and the fearless Joshua Van. I love this fight. This is a great fight. This is, again, one of the best fights on the card, aside from Knudsen and Pilastri. I mean, Joshua Van and Tagir Ulanbekov, you have pretty much striker versus grappler. Tagir can strike, he's long, he's tall, and he might give Joshua Van some similar problems to the likes of a Kevin Borjas, where he can land good 1-2s down the middle, use the jab, land a 1-2. He has good long straight punches, and those can be problems, or I'm sorry, those can cause problems for guys like Joshua Van, who are kind of a slip and rip, take time to download the data and then build up your game plan, try to wear out the opponent, slip, rip a couple shots to the body, slip, uppercut, hook, right hand, 1-1, 6-3, 1-6-3, 3 to the body and a head kick. But the one thing you can't allow Joshua Van to do is to download the data, to figure out his game plan, to get comfortable, because he's never really comfortable in the first round. He arguably lost the first round in his last fight against Felipe Bunes and then came on strong in round 2 and ended up TKOing him by just pouring on the pressure. I see this being a pretty similar fight where Tagir Ulanbekov was getting outstruck by Cody Durden in that fight. But he used his wrestling, he took his back, he went for guillotines, he eventually got a rear naked choke submission by being able to take the back. I do think that the grappling advantage in this fight is on the side of Tagir Ulanbekov, but when I really look at this fight, I think the perfect style matchup to beat a guy like Ulanbekov is a guy who can stay patient if he gets taken down, defend the submissions, work their way back up to the feet, and then eventually start to walk you down, start to break you down, start to land combinations, start to push you back. And I think that's what Joshua Van is, and I think Joshua Van has that in spades. I worry about the first round and a half, because I think the first round is probably going to be dictated by more of Ulanbekov closing the distance, getting takedowns, looking to take the back of Joshua Van, looking to lock up the rear naked choke. And I could even see Ulanbekov hurting Joshua Van in a striking contest because of how long and rangy he is, because of how good his straight punches are. He's not afraid to fight on the feet. But I do think, like I said, a guy like Van is going to be able to weather that storm. He's going to be able to work his way back up to the feet. He'll be able to stay patient, and I don't think he will get stuck on the ground in a compromised position for an entire round. He'll work his way back up. He'll work his way back up to the feet, and the minute he breaks off, he's going to be right in his face. Bop, 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 rip. Bop, 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 rip. Bop, 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 rip. Uppercut, hook. Bop, 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 bop. And I think he's going to start putting on the pace. He's going to start putting on the pressure. And I think he is eventually going to break down Ulanbekov for a late second or early third round stoppage via TKO. I think Joshua Van is one of the best prospects in the UFC. I'm one of the few people who picked him to beat Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Maybe I'm wrong, but I picked him in his UFC debut as I think he was a plus 200 underdog, something like that, and he won that fight. I picked against him with Kevin Borjas, which we had the right read in that fight. Borjas did clip him and hurt him early, but Van was able to stay in the fight, get on the inside, and just rip shots to the body, rip up top, and continue to build. He's very similar to a Max Holloway style of game plan. He's just not as tall and long as Holloway, but he'll get hit, he'll get clipped, he'll make it close early, but then he'll start to put it on. He'll start to build and build and build and build. We got Josh the Builder. That should be his nickname, Josh the Builder. But I'm going to go with fearless Joshua Van here as the almost 2-1 underdog. I think this is a good spot. I think guys who beat guys like Ulanbekov, it's a guy like Joshua Van with that style. Stay calm, stay patient, and get better as the fight goes on. I don't think Tagir is going to be able to wear him down over 15 minutes, and I don't think he'll be able to get prolonged control time once we get out of that first 5 minutes. First 7 minutes, then I think that's where Van really starts to take over and eventually gets that late second or early third round finish. So I'm going to go Joshua Van, the fearless Joshua Van as the plus 190 underdog to defeat Tagir Ulanbekov via third round TKO. I think he melts him with a body shot and puts him out. So give me Joshua Van, third round TKO as the underdog in this fight. All right, next fight up. This is the first fight on the main card. It's in the bantamweight division between Brady Hiestand taking on Garrett Armfield. Now, we had Armfield as an underdog against Brad Katona. He clearly won the first 2 rounds. Then he slowed down. Katona pushed him back, got some takedowns, and he lost the third round because he got tired. He said that with 2 minutes left in the last round, that's usually when he starts to gas. I think that's more of a mental problem where he thinks he's going to gas at that point, and once it gets to that point, he checks the clock, and then he kind of starts to gas. But he stayed in it. He didn't quit. He didn't give up, and he won the fight 2 rounds to 1. Again, as an underdog. In this fight, I think Brady Hiestand is long, he's rangy, but he's not going to be able to compete with Garrett Armfield on the feet. The one thing I do like about Hiestand is his constant left and right, his lateral movement. He moves in and out. He likes to cut off the opponent's circling and lateral movement with kicks. He's really heavy on lead leg roundhouse kicks, rear leg roundhouse kicks. Can throw some 1-2s as well, but I really think that the best path for Brady Hiestand is, kind of like Joshua Van, weather the storm and then try to work your wrestling. Get takedowns, get into the clinch, get in top position, continue to wear down a guy like Armfield, because Armfield is very technical on the feet. He uses good footwork, good movement, great 1-2 down the middle, good hooks. He doesn't really overthrow anything. Everything he throws is pretty much technically correct, and he has the power to sit you down and hurt you. I'm actually surprised he didn't hurt Brad Katona more in their fight. I thought he was going to be able to get a TKO in the first 2 rounds because of his power that he possesses, man. Garrett Armfield, he's not only crisp and technical, but in having that technicality and technical ability with your boxing and your footwork and your movement, it adds to the power, which can allow you to get more knockouts. I mean, just look at what he did to Toshiomi Kozama. I mean, the first time he really cracked him, the fight was pretty much over. Now, Kozama got knocked out by Rinya Nakamura on the road to UFC, so maybe he has some chin issues and some durability issues, but Garrett Armfield can crack, and I think if he gets into a striking matchup with Brady Hiestand, He can hurt him. Look at Brady Heastand's last fight against Danaa Batgarel. He got clipped and hurt multiple times early on in the fight. He got rocked at the beginning of the second round or the third round, got dropped, I think, 2 or 3 times in that fight, but then was able to just push the pace, continue to push forward, land some combinations, and then eventually in the third round, he just bum rushed him, took him down, and with 2 minutes left in the fight, he just continued to land ground and pound, just didn't stop until the ref pulled him off. I feel like that would have been really good on this last weekend's card because I don't know why they didn't stop the Punahele and Miguel Baeza fight. I mean, it was like 320 strikes to 25. There's no reason that fight shouldn't have been stopped in the second round or at the end of the first. I mean, I don't know, man. I think the ref wanted Baeza to get permanent brain damage. But, you know, that's besides the point. There was another fight on that card as well that I feel like should have been stopped. But either way, let's get back to what we're talking about here. Heastand versus Armfield. Heastand's going to be the better wrestler. He's going to have the better jiu-jitsu. He's probably going to have the better cardio towards the midpoint of the second round and going into the final round. I think that's really where Heastand takes over is in the second half of the fight. I think the first half of the fight is Armfield stuffing the takedowns, keeping it at range, and kind of cracking Brady Heastand on the feet and busting him up. That's really how I see this fight. It's a tale of two fights. Early on, I think Brady Heastand's outmatched. I think he gets cracked. I think he gets stuck behind the jab. I think he gets hit with the 1-2. Gets caught with combinations as he walks into the pocket. And, you know, he might get knocked out early. But when we get to the midpoint of the second round, when we get to that final round, that's where the gas tank, that's where the forward pressure, that's where the takedowns, that's where the ground and pound, that's where the positional control takes over for Brady Heastand. I actually think this fight is pretty close. I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised that Armfield is the favorite because, I mean, you look at Katona in his last fight he just had this weekend. He was like a minus 500 favorite. And that was against Jesse Butler, so it's a different kind of matchup. But, you know, beating a guy like that, he's not going to come in as an underdog again. But I'm kind of surprised it's not a pick'em. I thought they were going to make it maybe minus 120, minus 130 Armfield, plus 110 on a high stand. But they didn't. I mean, Armfield's almost a 2-1 favorite at minus 175. I wouldn't play Armfield at minus 200 or higher. I think under minus 200, he's a decent play. But I honestly think this is a dangerous fight because if he can't get Brady Heastand out of there in the first 2 rounds, if he can't hurt him really bad and win those rounds, maybe get a 10-8 in one round, you know, drop him multiple times, but he doesn't finish him, that third round's going to be dicey just like it was against Katona because although Heastand isn't exactly the same fighter, he does have that late cardio to push and he will go for a finish in the third round, unlike a guy like Katona. So you have a guy where, you know, Armfield was able to get past the third round and get past the end of the third round because Katona didn't really push the pace to get the finish and didn't put the pressure on. That's something that a guy like Heastand is going to be able to do. You know, unless he gets just destroyed in the first couple rounds, that third round is where Heastand's going to push Armfield back, going to look for takedowns. He'll constantly look for takedowns, get on the top position, and he's not going to stop punching or looking for subs until the ref pulls him off. So my pick is going to be Garrett Armfield. I think he does more damage. I think he causes at least 1 knockdown in this fight. I do think there's a possibility he gets a TKO, but I'm going to play the safe side here. I'm going to go with Armfield 29-28 split decision. I think it's going to be close because I really do think Heastand, I've said his name like 2 different ways the entire time I broke down this fight, but I think Heastand will take over the longer the fight goes. He's going to take over in that third round. You know, with the last 2 minutes of the second round, last minute and a half, I think that's where Heastand's going to take over, and he might get a third round finish. So if I'm playing Heastand, I'm playing Brady Heastand to win in round 3, because I really think that's kind of his only win condition in this style of matchup. But I'm going to say that Armfield does enough damage in the first 2 rounds to get him, and then he loses the third round, but, you know, he doesn't get 10-8'd. So my pick is going to be Garrett Armfield, 29-28 split decision over Brady Heastand, but I think this is a close fight, and this is going to be a good one. Next fight up is in the flyweight division. Man, we got a lot of flyweight fights on this card, and it's going to be between Asu Almabayev, who comes in with a record of 19-2, taking on Jose Johnson, who comes back at, I believe, 16-8 or 16-6. I really think this fight is going to be one-way traffic. Johnson actually has good grappling. He has good wrestling, good ability to take the back, can look for a rear naked choke. He's very long, and tall. And when you're a long and tall guy, you can find chokes, you can find arm bars, you can find sweeps better than other individuals, but you also leave yourself open and more susceptible to getting your arm caught, to getting put in a triangle because of how long you are. So it's a double-edged sword. It helps you in some ways and it doesn't in others. I would say Almabayev is the better striker. I think Johnson's good. He uses good jabs, good 1-2s. You know, typical weapons for a long guy. Probably will throw that front kick up the middle. But if he tries to go low with low kicks, I think he will get taken down. And I think that Johnson is going to put up a fight, but it's only going to be for a certain amount of time before Almabayev starts landing shots on the feet, level changes, gets the takedown, starts landing, you know, some big elbows, hammer fists, starts passing from the full guard to the half guard, goes for an arm triangle, he probably defends it, passes to the full mount, lands some more ground and pound, and I think eventually he just takes the back of Jose Johnson and locks up a rear naked choke and gets the submission. I think Almabayev is the truth in terms of his overall skill level, and I also think that this guy is going to be able to find a finish in this fight. I think just like the... there was a fight earlier. I can't think of it. Just like, Jekasargi and Weston Wilson. I think this is a similar thing where a lot of people might overthink it. A lot of people might just be like, well, Johnson can land some shots. He has some submissions of his own, and that is true. You know, he does have some good skills in certain aspects of the MMA game. But overall, I just think Almabayev's better everywhere. I think Almabayev, if he just can't be too reckless. You know, you don't want to come in and have your hands down and just try to bum rush against a guy like Johnson, because he can use those long, rangy punches and clip you on your way in, and he can lock you up in a sub. So if Almabayev doesn't mind his P's and Q's when he shoots a takedown, he might get his neck caught, but I think he'll be able to defend it, probably get a takedown even if Johnson goes for a guillotine, probably threaten that Von Flue choke, get him to let go of it, pass to mount, land some shots. Johnson's going to try to get it up, he'll flatten him out, land ground and pound, and get a rear naked choke. So I'm going to go Asu Almabayev to defeat Jose Johnson via second round rear naked choke submission. Like I said, this is another fight where I just think don't overthink it. The answer is right in front of you. So Almabayev second round rear naked choke is going to be the pick. Up next, we've got a battle in the bantamweight division between Douglas Silva da Silva de Andrade, or Douglas da Silva de Andrade. I know his name's something like that. Taking on Miles Johns. Miles Choppa Johns, 29-5 for Andrade to 14-2 for Miles Johns. Miles Johns is a guy that I've gotten right in some fights and I've gotten wrong in others. Douglas Silva de Andrade is the same guy. Same type of story. I don't have the greatest read on Silva, and I don't have the greatest read on Johns. I think the more durable guy is Douglas Silva de Andrade, but I also think he's getting older. He's much older than Johns. I think he's 5-6 years older than Miles Johns, and you know, MMA is a young man's game in most aspects, and it's becoming more and more of a young man's game as the game continues to mature. I think Silva has the more well-rounded striking, has really good switch kicks to the body, good low kicks, throws big bombs, but he's also pretty technical with the way that he strikes. Miles Johns is a chinny fighter where he looks good, but he kind of doesn't throw combinations. He really just looks to land a big overhand, a big hook, a big uppercut, just looks for big shots. But he has the wrestling to fall back on. I do think he's the better wrestler in this fight, and if he wants to make this fight easy, he should have the same style of game plan that he had in the Cody Gibson fight. I think he can get takedowns against Andrade. I think he can take him down. I think he can look for ground and pound. Silva can go for submission. Silva is not the easiest guy to take down, but I think using your full game of mixed martial arts, you should be able to get takedowns. You should be able to land ground and pound. But again, when you're looking at a guy like Miles Johns against a fighter who's as explosive and as powerful as Douglas Silva de Andrade, I mean, will throw spinning kicks, switch kicks, spinning back fists, flying knees. He'll throw everything out there, and he's still very powerful. And, you know, he's not really... I would say the more chinny fighter in this fight who has the higher durability issues is Miles Johns, because we've seen him get dropped multiple times. We've seen him get knocked out. We've seen him get finished, and Silva has the explosiveness to be able to hurt a guy like Miles Johns and finish him. I do think Miles Johns has the better wrestling, and I think that's probably how he wins this fight. If it's a straight kickboxing match, I would honestly favor Andrade to win it, but I think the grappling is going to be too much. I think the takedowns will be there. I think that the better cardio is going to come from Miles Johns, but I think both of these guys slow down. And I honestly think this is like a 50-50 fight. I know a lot of people are going to be on Miles Johns, but that's just a guy I can never confidently back at this point because we know of his durability concerns. We know of his issues. We know that he can get cracked. We know that he can get hurt. And we know that he can get finished even in fights that he's ahead in. And against a guy who has as much power, is as explosive and as dangerous as Douglas Silva de Andrade, I don't want to go to that side and be too confident. I am going to pick Miles Johns to win this by decision. I think he probably gets more takedowns. He'll win the round based on control time. I think he gets outstruck on the feet. I think the higher volume, the more variety of weapons comes from Douglas Silva de Andrade with the knees, the spinning kicks, the spinning back fists, the 1-2s, and he's not completely washed, so this isn't an easy fight for Miles Johns at all, but I think he uses his wrestling, and I think he grinds his way to a decision, so I'm going to go Miles Choppa Johns to get the job done, 29-28 unanimous decision. It could be a split, though, because I could easily see Johns getting clipped with big shots and maybe getting cut, getting wobbled, and even though he's winning the rounds, the bigger round-winning moments might come from Andrade. So Miles Johns is going to be the pick, 29-28 unanimous decision or split decision using his wrestling. But yeah, this is a fight I wouldn't bet on, and I think it's actually pretty close, but I got to go with the younger guy in Miles Johns. All right, up next in the featherweight division, you have a banger between Twilight Timmy Kwamba taking on Lucas Almeida. 14-3 for Almeida, 8-2 for Kwamba. The experience is on the side of Almeida. The UFC experience is on the side of Almeida. But I believe the better fighter to be the favorite in Timmy Kwamba. He can wrestle. He's going to have better ground control, better takedowns, better ability to look for a submission when we know that Almeida, even though I believe he has a couple submissions in his career, he's not really known as being a good grappler, and he doesn't know what to do off of his back. So I think Timmy Kwamba would probably be, smart to go for takedowns, look to get Almeida down to the ground, look for ground and pound, look to set up submissions, and just kind of rinse and repeat. But the thing is, Kwamba can compete with Almeida on the feet. But if you give Almeida a striking matchup, he's always live. It doesn't matter who he is, or it doesn't matter who he's going against, I should say. He's always live on the feet. Almeida has very solid kickboxing. You saw that in the fight against Mike Trezano, where he came in as a pretty sizable underdog and was able to land beautiful combos, 3 to the body, right low kick, get his head off the center, 1-2, bang, came back with that left hook, perfect load up on the hip, and came back with the hook and dropped Mike Trezano after getting hurt and dropped himself. The durability concerns are definitely on the side of Almeida, and I would say the more durable fighter is Timmy Kwamba, and Kwamba can compete on the feet. If you go back and watch some of his fights on the regional scene, he has a beautiful head kick knockout. The one thing I like about Kwamba is he listens to his coaches. He came into the UFC, had a debut against Balaji Oki, who's a very good point fighter, very good striker, got some takedowns against Oki later in the fight. It was a very close fight, but ended up losing that fight via decision. This fight should technically go to Timmy Kwamba in almost every area except for power. I think the power in the boxing is on the side of Almeida. He's very explosive. He rips to the body. He throws good low kicks. Like I said, punctuates his combos with low kicks, moves around well. He just has issues with the defense, and I think the defensive irresponsibility is a bigger concern on the side of Almeida than it is on the side of Timmy Kwamba. Kwamba's a very smart fighter, and I like the fact that he listens to his coaches, which is something that I brought up in the beginning of this breakdown. If he needs to get takedowns and his coaches call it, I believe he'll go for takedowns. And I think if he gets Almeida to the ground, he finishes him with ground and pound, or he finishes him with a submission. On the feet, it's going to be more dangerous, but I also think Timmy Kwamba can compete on the feet against Almeida. But again, you're playing a dangerous game against a kickboxer the level of an Almeida. He just does not have good defense. You see him move his head off the center line when he throws combinations, but when punches come back at him, he just stays on the center line and doesn't move his head at all. Gets hit with 1-2s, gets hit with shots down the center. I mean, look at the fight with Andre Fili. He got clipped early on in an exchange. And yeah, if he landed first in the exchange, he probably would have knocked out Andre Fili, but he didn't. He got hit and got knocked out. Now, if Almeida landed first, maybe he would have been the one to knock out Andre Fili, because we saw Fili go up against Dan Ige and get knocked out in the first round right over the top of the jab with the overhand right. He got put down and finished. I think Kwamba's the side here. I really do. If I had to pick a fighter who I'd like to see win, I'd like to see Almeida win. I'm a bigger fan of his style. He just, I don't know, he burned me out the last 2 times that I picked him. And this could be very similar to last weekend where I said, which fight was it? I picked somebody. Oh, Charles Radke. I picked against him against Urbina, and then I'm like, no, I got to pick Charles Radke here, but I hadn't faded Carlos Prates yet, and obviously fading Carlos Prates was a bad idea. Kind of kicking myself for that pick, because originally I was thinking of going with Prates because of his Muay Thai striking, but I just ended up changing my mind. So on this one, I'm just going to side with the fighter who I believe to be better, the fighter who I believe that makes better decisions in the octagon, and the fighter that has more weapons in his back pocket, and that's Twilight Timmy Kwamba. I think Kwamba finds a finish here. It could be on the feet, it could be on the ground, could be a rear naked choke, could be an arm triangle, could be landing a big shot on Almeida's chin when his chin's in the air. I just do not like the durability concerns and the fact that Almeida just cannot fight off of his back. So I'm going to go with Twilight Timmy Kwamba to find a finish here against Lucas Almeida. I think he lands good shots on the feet. He's got good jabs, good 1-2s, rips to the body well, good head kicks, very good explosive head kicks as well. I think he lands a big shot on the feet, drops him, jumps on him, lands some ground and pound, and gets a submission. I'm going to go Twilight Timmy Kwamba to defeat Lucas Almeida via second round arm triangle choke submission. I think he hurts him with something on the feet, wobbles him, Almeida goes down, Kwamba jumps on him with some ground and pound, and then locks up that arm triangle. So second round arm triangle choke submission for Twilight Timmy Kwamba here. Alright, up next you've got the co-main event of the evening between the man that nobody wants to fight in the 15-1 Ikram Aliskerov, who was originally set to take on Andre Muniz, taking on a Contender Series alum in Antonio Tricoli, who comes in with a record of 12 victories and 3 defeats. I'm going to keep this short and sweet, man. Like, Tricoli has decent grappling. He can get takedowns. He can look for submissions. He has decent power on the feet, decent striking. But aside from a Hail Mary shot that clips Aliskerov on the chin, he's not going to get this done, man. He's not. Aliskerov's going to get another first-round finish. Maybe he makes it to the second round. There's always that possibility, but Aliskerov should make easy work of Tricoli. There's nothing I see that I think really gives Aliskerov trouble, besides the fact that maybe Aliskerov comes in overconfident and gets clipped with a big shot coming in and gets hurt. But the only person to ever put him away was Khamzat Chimaev with that beautiful rear uppercut to the sidestep pivot. One of the best knockouts that Chimaev's had in his whole career. But aside from that, he's just running through everybody. I think Anthony Fluffy Hernandez was probably his most difficult fight in this division. And I hope after a win here for Aliskerov, we get Anthony Fluffy Hernandez versus Ikram Aliskerov booked again, because I think that's a very, very difficult matchup for Aliskerov, and a very competitive one at that, even if he is able to get the job done there. But I like Aliskerov here. I mean, don't sit here and think about it for too long. He's the better striker. He has more power. He doesn't rush things, but he finds his openings. He finds head kicks. He finds that beautiful 1-2 right down the middle like he landed on Phil Hawes. He can go with flying knees like when he finished Warley Alves, and I think he hurts him on the feet, explodes on him, and gets him out of there with a TKO. I see a lot of people going with submissions. I would not be surprised if he grabbed his neck or grabbed an armbar or grabbed a Kimura for Aliskerov, but I think he just stops him with striking. I think he hurts him on the feet and just puts him away in round 1. Give me Ikram Aliskerov first round knockout against Antonio Tricoli. Smart play, or like a tricky play to get better value, would probably be Aliskerov by knockout in round 2, but I think he gets the finish in round 1. So I'm going to go with Ikram Aliskerov, first round knockout over Antonio Tricoli. Again, just not a fight you need to overthink. I just think Tricoli took this fight because they couldn't find anybody else, and that's really all you need to think about it. If Tricoli wins, then I'll shut my mouth, and anybody who bets on him looks very smart, but I just don't see it, man. The Aliskerov train's going to keep on running until he gets some actual good competition. So Ikram Aliskerov, first round knockout here against Antonio Tricoli. Now we are at the main event of the evening in the 125-pound flyweight division between Alex Perez, who's coming off that brutal second-round knockout over Mateus Nicolau, taking on Tatsuro Taira, who comes back with a undefeated professional record of 15 victories and no defeats. I know everybody and their mother is going to be on Taira here because he's been pretty flawless throughout his UFC career thus far. But if you go back and you look at the Edgar Chairez fight, he got clipped a couple times. He got rocked. He got hurt. He got put in a guillotine choke at least twice. Yes, he defended it. The last one at the end of round 3, I mean, if there was 10 or 15 more seconds in the fight, I think Chairez would have got that submission. And we know that Chairez has a good front choke series because he finished Daniel Lacerda with the similar situation. I believe it was a front choke or a Darce choke, something like that. But Taira's good. I mean, the guy's got great transitions, good ability to cut the corner and get the takedowns, get to the top position, and land ground and pound and look for submissions. I mean, the guy will go for ground and pound, but you saw in the Carlos Hernandez fight, who is actually a pretty solid striker training out of Valley Flow over here in Chicago, he, caught him with a big right hand and hurt him. Pretty much dropped him with that and then finished him with ground and pound, didn't even go for the submission. And everybody pictures Taira as this submission artist. He can go for arm bars, go for triangle arm bars, can transition and chain submissions together, and he has some of the best grappling in the division for how young he is. Alex Perez is a dog, though. Everybody was doubting him against Muhammad Mokaev, and he arguably could have won that fight. Really good takedown defense, good ability to land some shots on the feet against Mokaev, definitely outstruck him, got taken down, worked his way back up, defended submissions, and the takedown defense and his ability to work his way back up was part of the reason why I took him to win by knockout against Matheus Nicolau, because if you can't really get your grappling off, who's the better striker? I think in this fight, Alex Perez is again going to be the better striker. Taira has showcased good striking. We know that Perez can be hit. He can be clipped. We've seen him get submitted early in fights against the likes of Davison Figueiredo, as well as the champion in Alexandre Pantoja. And this seems like another fight where people are just going to expect forward pressure, chain wrestling, takedowns, and a submission early for Taira. Could it happen? 100%. In the first 2.5, 3 rounds, Taira's live to get a submission. He's also dangerous on the feet. Like we said, he moves around well. He uses good striking. He hurt Carlos Hernandez and jumped on him and got a TKO. Like I said, when everybody was expecting a submission. Just when you think you have the answer, we change the question is kind of what Taira's doing. Everybody was on Taira by sub, and he goes in and he gets the TKO. So we know that he's improving. We know that he's getting better. But I honestly think there's still some holes in the game of Tatsuro Taira. And although I believe he should be the favorite, I kind of want to pick the underdog again in Alex Perez, just like in the last fight against Matheus Nicolau. I think this is a rejuvenated, a healthy, a ready-to-go Perez, and he got clipped with a left hook against Matheus Nicolau, but that's also Nicolau's best shot, and he wasn't able to put him down, and then he was able to work his way in, 3, 4, 5, 6 punch combos, changing levels to the head, to the body. He hurts him, he rocks him, and then he eventually gets him up against the fence and bombs away with that right hand and knocks out Matheus Nicolau. Now, again, you got to take the facts with the grains of salt, where Nicolau is a chinny fighter. Even in fights that he's won, when he gets clipped, he can be knocked out. Is Taira that chinny? I don't think so, but we really don't know because we haven't seen him have to go through that much adversity, at least inside of the UFC. He kind of just runs through everybody, and I feel like Perez is the first guy that's going to give him real resistance. Like Chairez gave him resistance, he hurt him on the feet, wobbled him, he put him in a submission, and he, like I said, would have got that rear naked or that guillotine choke as like a 6-1 underdog in the final round of the fight, but he was getting dominated with positional grappling, he was getting control on the floor, but I think with the experience that Perez has against guys like Davison Figueiredo, against heavy wrestlers and heavy chain wrestlers like Muhammad Mokaev, who everybody believes is the next coming of Jesus Christ in the flyweight division and potentially a next champion, I think everything is building up to him being probably the toughest fight. I'm not going to say probably. I think this is going to be the toughest test of Tatsuro Taira's career, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think he's going to pass the test. I think Perez is going to find a knockout again in this fight, just like he did against Nicolau. I think he's got the way better striking. He's way faster on the feet with his striking than Taira. I think he's going to have good enough defensive wrestling to be able to stuff the takedowns. If you could do it against Muhammad Mokaev, I think that Taira probably chains takedowns together a little bit better. But at the same time, I kind of think they're similar levels in terms of the overall wrestling, where I would give the jiu-jitsu advantage to Taira, but you kind of need the wrestling in order to get to the positions to use your jiu-jitsu, and I think that Perez is going to be able to stuff those takedowns and get back at striking range, and we know that Taira has been working on his striking. Perez can be hit. He is hittable, but with that bob and weave style, slipping and countering, ripping to the body, coming back up top, pushing the opponent back, I think we have a new, rejuvenated, and most importantly, a fresh version of Alex Perez, and I think he's going to be able to clip the chin of Taira after stuffing his takedowns, working his way back up to the feet, defending submissions. I think he gets back up, tires Taira out, and I think he finishes him in the third round. I'm going to go Alex Perez again as I think he's plus 160, plus 165 here as the dog. I'm going to take him by knockout. I think he finds the chin of Taira, hurts him, and knocks him out. I think once you start to crack a guy like Taira, he's going to panic wrestle, and he's going to shoot, and I think Perez is going to stuff the takedowns and, work back at the striking distance that he wants to and start to land and start to put it on Taira, and I think he finishes him. I know Taira's, a huge prospect. I know he's undefeated, but there's always a point where these guys lose unless your name's Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I think Perez is the perfect style of fighter and has had the perfect style of matchups to be able to win a fight like this against Tatsuro Taira. So give me Alex Perez again as the underdog. I'm going back-to-back on Perez with a third-round knockout against Tatsuro Taira, defending the wrestling, outstriking him, and cracking him on the chin, probably up against the fence, or maybe on a level change he lands a knee, and I think he knocks out the undefeated prospect, handing him his first loss in his career as well as inside the UFC. Alex Perez to win the main event by knocking out Tatsuro Taira in round 3.